Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. On the last episode we saw Cretheus fighting off a Lusitani ambush. He managed to hold the enemy with minimal casualties in the end thanks to the enemy firing off a little bit too early. Then Eusebius was able to move along the coast and attack Gadira, a relatively unguarded Lusitani stronghold which he took with ease. He moved on to join up with Cretheus to capture Cartuba, unifying that province and really setting the Lusitani back in terms of territory. Cretheus moved down to Gadira but was immediately attacked by a Lusitani counterattack coming from the south. The balance bar looked really good, but then in the battle it was a lot more even. He faced a hard fight and took extreme casualties among his leading units, holding the enemy out of the town. But he was ultimately victorious and is still raring to go. The people of Carthage took well to the Greeks as rulers. To the upper classes, the chance to get a taste of the Massalians' trade wealth was incentive enough to welcome any enforced cultural changes and new faces among the nobility that came with it. To the common people, it was just another change of ruler, continuing in a line of conquest that left them cynical about their hopes for a true cultural identity. Holding it all together was the anachronistically egalitarian charter of Massalian colonial laws, set in place by Eusebius, who enforced them strictly whenever called upon as a judge. So Cretheus has just successfully defended Gadira against the Lusitani counterattack. You can see we lost a couple of hundred men, some of our pike phalanxes taking heavy damage, losing half their troops in some cases, but the enemy were sorely routed and it'll be a while before they can build up forces to come back. We have an interesting event saying that one of the slaves of the Timucoi is apparently betraying some information over to the council. I have opportunities to try and deal with this. I can buy her back, I can kill her, or I can just ignore her and hope the truths she gives out aren't that bad. I decided the Timucoi wouldn't risk anything and would just have her killed. Gelon's continuing his quest down towards Numantia. He wants to steal that from the Lusitani because it's part of one of our provinces, and it should be easy enough to take given that the Lusitani have shown no signs of having any strength in that area, so we'll see how that goes. Now other considerations include Cretheus moving to attack Tingis just to the south. We don't know of any Lusitani forces in that area either. The ones that we defeated at Gadira came from there, so it's reasonable to assume there aren't really any other forces in the general area. It is a pretty big Lusitani stronghold, that whole province of Mauritania, and we know they have more forces over to the east, but it looks relatively safe in our area. Similarly, Eusebius can do something moving west. We know the Lusitani only have that one tiny stack of troops there, so it would be pretty easy for us to just go and take these two provinces, which is actually Lusitania, that province, that's their homeland, so that's particularly effective. So I decided to do that. The Daemons Eponymous moved to begin a siege. You can see the enemy has an advantage on us, but they only have 2 turns worth of supplies, meaning I can just siege them out, and probably won't take too many losses due to attrition. It will be a winter siege, but then again, winter on the southern end of the Iberian Peninsula probably isn't going to be all that bad, so hopefully my troops will be fine to continue the siege there. For Cretheus, I also decided he was going to go on the offensive. I move out and attack the survivors of the force that attacked Gadira. The balance bar's pretty far in our favour, even with all of the garrison from Tingis coming out, but the Orchard Resolve looks really bad, so I think we've got another case where the balance bar on the campaign map is lying, and then the Orchard Resolve results tell you the actual odds of winning. So we're going to have to fight this one ourselves. On the battlefield, I set up my deployment, but all of the enemy's reinforcements inconveniently came onto the field right next to my deployment zone, so I had to immediately start rushing to create a new formation to fight with all of these militia coming over from the town, whilst the enemy's main force just stood out on the plains to the east. So I'm rushing my hoplites to the front line, and my pike phalanxes as well, ready to stop the enemy. The main problem I had was that the enemy looked like they were going to run right past me. I didn't want them to go and link up with their main force. I'd rather fight them right now, get rid of these guys, and then go and deal with the enemy's survivors from the previous battle, once all of these guys have been driven off the field. So I do a cavalry attack on their leading units, forcing all the other guys to start engaging with my cavalry. Once they're in combat, I can lock them down for a short time and move in my own infantry to fight them. My cavalry take a beating from the enemy's missile units, tons of slingers and javelin men throwing at them, but they managed to escape, successfully drawing off tons of the enemy's units to fight with my guys, who are now setting up a formation, a really good formation as well. I'm going to have a downhill advantage against the enemy as I fight with my phalanx. So overall I'm hoping for an easy victory. You can see in fact the balance bar has swung pretty far back in the enemy's favour compared to the campaign map as predicted, so there really is something wrong with the balance bar in this game. But anyway, the enemy are now engaging in the front of my phalanx. My guys are struggling to set up because they just ran into position, but soon we'll have a proper phalanx going. Meanwhile, my shock cavalry have snuck around the back of the enemy to attack all of the missile units that they left behind. They don't stand any chance. The shock cavalry will immediately kill them. Their morale breaks, and because they're next to the edge of the map, they can rout off the map by just turning into ghosts, representing them leaving the battle. So we didn't get much of a chance to kill the rest of them, but we don't really need to. I have plenty of forces easily outflanking the enemy, chasing away some of the enemy's other missile units, since about half of their army from the town actually didn't stop to fight. One half did, one half didn't. It would have been nice to catch them all, but the fact that I've only got half makes life even easier for this part of the battle. I can get a massive numerical advantage on the small enemy force trying to hold me off and completely destroy them, making it even easier to face the rest of their army. So they're fighting uphill into a pike phalanx. They're taking a rain of javelins and arrows from my troops behind, and a lot of these guys are just armed townsfolk or garrison units who aren't really meant for this kind of heavy combat. So very quickly they rout and get out of there, an easy victory over those men. So now I've got an opportunity to reform my army, get a proper line going and prepare to face the rest of the enemy's army. Curiously, one enemy unit was routing but got sort of stuck in the middle of my pike phalanx and actually couldn't escape. So they're just going to fight continuously in the middle of my line whilst I set up the rest of my troops ready to fight the enemy. You can see I also released the war dogs to chase those routing units away from my formation whilst I set up. Unfortunately, these guys actually stopped routing just before the dogs reached them, which will reduce the effectiveness, but still doesn't reduce it that much. The dogs charge into the enemy and maul a whole bunch of the enemy's men. So even though they just came back from routing, very quickly they're going back into routing mode as the dogs take them down. So the enemy are now just charging my position. I have a hill advantage. I can set up my pike phalanx to receive them. It's being slightly disrupted by some routing units still amongst them, but very soon we're going to have a big advantage over the enemy's line. Without a decisive strike into Mauritania, the Lusitani will leverage their power against us no matter the result in Iberia. It is essential to a peaceful conclusion to this war that the most warlike of the two parties be extinguished, and that, fortunately enough, is our enemy. Therefore, I move without delay to pacify the coastal cities most vital to the enemy's power. Further ventures into the deeper reaches of these deserts may reveal yet more enemies and yet more opportunities. I take leave to partake of such ventures as I see fit. Make sure that Eusebius and the Daemon stay in Iberia. There's plenty he'll find to busy himself with a little persuasion. The enemy moved up some light troops, but I just filled the sky with my own arrows, completely destroying these unarmoured foes and sending them routing. Now the enemy's main force will make its advance up towards our very powerful line. In the background you can see our cavalry destroying some enemy routers and lighter forces behind enemy lines. So the enemy commit against my pikes just as I wanted, with arrows and javelins raining down upon them the whole time. Overall, a pretty safe situation for the Massalian line there. One possible area of danger was where my cavalry behind the enemy's lines got caught up fighting the enemy's general. The general had very heavy cavalry who were able to beat my guys in a close melee. So I just kept them fighting for a while and then moved in Cretheus with his very heavy cavalry to hit the enemy's heavy cav in the rear, hoping that committing my best men here and risking Cretheus will allow me to save some of my cavalry and defeat the enemy's general. Very quickly that general went down, and as he went, his men decided they weren't going to keep fighting against my line. They weren't doing very well anyway. They start retreating, a chain rout ensues, a decisive victory is declared. So this effectively means that Cretheus has crushed all of the forces, both of the surviving Lusitani army and of the Tingis garrison, meaning he could now move in and capture the town. Let's take a closer look at the battle results. You can see we lost a very small number of troops, the enemy losing absolutely loads. Both armies being almost completely destroyed. I'm going to enslave the captives, and now, as I said, the city itself is pretty much ripe for the taking. It still has a small garrison and a navy defending it, but it's going to be extremely weak in comparison to the hands of the Timucoi. You can see I begin a siege, balance bar super far in my favour. I can take it without any losses really, so let's do that. Now the question for me was, am I actually going to try and press into Mauritania and capture this region to make it part of Massalian territory, or should I just destroy it, make it so the Lusitani can't use it, and then focus on building up my new gains in Iberia? I decided I was going to capture this region, if only because fighting the Lusitani is pretty much just a land grab against the Carthaginians. So I want to occupy as much Lusitani territory as possible so that the Carthaginians can't have it later on, so that I'll be an equal match with them in our alliance. So I occupy the city and immediately get to work on thinking about what I'm going to do to it. It has lots of buildings I can't use, so I'm going to destroy some of them and start converting some of them over. So the next step will be either to move southwest against Migdol or to go east towards Eol. Eol has a full stack of Lusitani troops, so that's the direction I want to go in terms of both offensive and defensive moves. You can see here Carthage is now faithfully defended by our two allies. Both the Carthaginians and the Celtiberians have committed a full stack to defending our sort of capital of the Iberian attack. So very nice of our allies to see them like that, just standing by our territory. So now we're going to move on. The Celtiberian Confederation have a request. They want me to go to war against a client state of Carthage, just the one right on the edge of the map that doesn't really have much influence. But really, if I went to war with them, damaging my relationship with Carthage just to get better relations with the Celtiberians, that would not be a smart move. Instead, I decided to just give the Celtiberians some money to see if they would like me, because I want to keep the Carthaginians and the Celtiberians on side, even though they're actually kind of against each other. It turns out I was able to kill that slave who was leaking secrets, although they actually did leak the secrets too early, but without evidence from them being alive, it was not able to actually come to anything. So we lost a bit of influence, but still not too bad. So now it's time for Cretheus to start his campaign already. Tingis is very stable, so I don't need to hang around and garrison the area or anything like that. I can just move on straight away, especially because Cretheus' personal reputation as a peaceful man mean that he is actually very accepted by these regions. I can take these places and still have massive public order bonuses just because Cretheus is in the province. So I move out and destroy a raiding Lusitani force without any hassle. I was still a bit worried about leaving Tingis completely undefended because the Lusitani could recruit an army behind my lines and then attack it, but I decided it was unlikely, and going to face their main forces over here in the east was more important. Crushing them will effectively end this war decisively in our favour. The enemy will have a numeric advantage and will be fighting on their own ground, but I'm confident that Cretheus can pull out a victory. So I'm sending him east. It'll be a few turns before he's ready to actually attack the enemy if they don't come towards us. Meanwhile, Gelon, still continuing his expedition, finds that the Carthaginians have got there before him. Numantia is already under siege by Carthage and it looks like they're going to win, so there's no real reason for me to continue that adventure down. The only thing he could do was help the Carthaginians take it, which isn't really in our favour at all. So Gelon has been disappointed by that. He's going to just head back towards Massalia, just so I have a force back at our capital in case anything goes wrong. For example, if the Celtiberians declared war on me, I'd be in trouble, so having this massive powerful army hanging around is quite useful. Moving on again, we learned that Lusitani happen to want peace with us. At this particular juncture, peace is almost desirable because we've kind of taken what we need. But in terms of the actual war, we have a giant advantage. The Lusitani have nothing. It's really in our advantage to continue that land grab, to continue gaining power against the Carthaginians. So I did not accept that deal. I considered demanding 4,000 money because they said they might accept it. But actually, I didn't want to stop the war even for that money. So we keep it going, and immediately the force that Eusebius has under siege in Abora sallies out to attack him. The balance bar really far in our favour, but as the auto-resolve hints, it's another lying balance bar. This is actually a more even fight, so we're going to have to do this one ourselves on the battlefield. Let's see the Daemons do their thing. The decision was war. No end to the fighting that damns our people to defeat. Cowards. Too scared to tolerate us even lying on the ground beside them. No matter. This battle was destined, no matter the decisions of their slimy word dealers. Our people see no reason to let one Greek set foot on our streets, and will happily risk all for a chance to gut those smiling Daemons. No man fights like a man defending his livelihood. And no man fights as poorly as one lost in a land of hungry wolves when a warm bed calls from home. And no man who does not know what it means to be an Iberian will survive this happy day. So Eusebius prepares to fight. We've got a nice position right in the middle of the battlefield where there's a random cliff we can use to protect our right flank. So first I move archers forward to defend the small hill that cliff is part of, and then I'll be moving my main line forwards to defend it. Meanwhile, my heavy swordsmen are going to deploy on an echelon on the right so they can go around the edge of this cliff and attack the enemy's formation once they're locked in place by the main line along the top of that ridge. So the enemy make their advance, we treat them to a greeting of arrows as they come in. Their lighter forces take a lot of hits but don't seem to take many casualties, but once they hit the main line they're going to be in huge trouble. Most of them are just charging right towards my hoplite line, exactly what I need. I've got a pike phalanx on either end of the line. Not quite as powerful, but just as difficult to penetrate, so overall the enemy probably can't get through our line at all, especially because Eusebius' troops are mostly very elite, and all of his personal bonuses and army traditions further up their stats. So as the enemy commit along the front of the line, my plan has pretty much already worked. They've done exactly what I need them to do. Their leading unit gets wiped out immediately, they pile their cavalry in against my spearmen, all good stuff, making life easy for me. They haven't even engaged the whole front of my line, so I'll be able to fold out a little bit and get a few tiny flank attacks. So with the enemy mostly committed there, it's time to move my swords around the cliffs as planned. They do have one unit coming around to meet those swords, but it's just a squad of medium spears, so my heavy swords should be able to beat them. As I advance they turn back, realizing that fighting those heavy swords is a bad idea, but of course I will now chase them down, engage them in melee, and gain an advantage in that fight. Meanwhile, my cavalry can go around the back of the enemy's army and deal with all of their light forces. They kept no reserves, so they couldn't stop me doing this at all. Their general, who only had armed townsfolk as his unit, is getting completely wiped out fighting with the elite warriors on the front line. There's very little chance that he'll survive, and of course pushing the general back will further demoralise the enemy. A rain of arrows and javelins coming down as well is especially effective against the unshielded townsfolk. So you can see units starting to fall back in this area. Overall, this engagement is now pretty much decided. We just have to wait for the enemy to get ground down a bit, and then once they go, my cavalry can harass them, making sure the routers shatter and the remaining forces see what's going to happen to them, further demoralising them. In the background there you can see there's one more Iberian unit. It's actually a squad of very heavy swords that for some reason didn't actually commit to this fight. So I guess they really needed them because it's gone very badly with all these light and medium troops. Those guys start to fall back, realising they've done pretty much no damage and cost a lot of their lives. The survivors escape. A decisive victory is declared for Eusebius. An easy fight, went exactly as I planned, no surprises from the Iberians there. So this means that the city is now very likely to fall into our hands. Let's have a quick look at the battle results. You can see Eusebius lost almost nothing, whilst the enemy lost thousands of men. Overall a perfect victory, perhaps even more than a decisive victory as the game calls it. So I'm going to enslave some of the captives I took, and now the enemy are going to be starved out of this city by the end of the turn. So if we just push through the other factions, who usually we don't see do anything, we come into the next turn and the city is captured. I'm going to occupy this region. I'm still land grabbing. This of course is the Lusitani homeland as well, so a particularly poignant place to take, meaning they only have one settlement left on Iberia itself. I believe that's their starting settlement. I wanted to see if I could move out straight away to attack it, but now I have to wait around a turn to restore my movement points, so next time we'll move on to engage with that settlement. Now down in Mauritania, I was just checking that Tingis is safe to leave. It's got a building garrison force, so I thought if the Lusitani do have a small surprise force, we'll stand a good chance of fighting them off there, meaning it should be okay for Cretheus to continue his mission east towards Io, where the Lusitani main force is still waiting. I didn't want to press too deep into their territory and then get attacked by that main force, so I just went slightly in to begin with and then fortified using the rest of my movement points. So perhaps trying to tempt the Lusitani out to fight me in a field battle before I engage the settlement, which will make life easier. But even if they don't, next turn I'll be able to push on and besiege them inside the town and then just see what the balance bar looks like. I was still a bit worried about Tingis though, so I decided I was going to recruit a new general to be a backup to Cretheus essentially, just to hang around and make sure things are okay. The general I chose was someone from the Timucoi. Nothing particularly special about him other than that he had higher stats than the other candidates. His name is Eurysthenes, and I'm going to be giving him some Massalian veteran swords, a unit we haven't seen yet, as bodyguards, so we'll see them in action if Eurysthenes ever actually sees a battle. I'm hoping he won't, of course, but if he does, then hopefully we'll be safe to have Tingis under his control. So now pushing on into the next turn, nothing happened during the end turn sequence, so Cretius is now free to push on to Eol and start the siege as I mentioned. The balance bar does not look good at all. The enemy's army inside there is quite powerful and experienced by the looks of things, even though it has a lot of light forces, the same for their garrison army. But I can bring over Homer from over in Carthage to come and start a naval blockade, so that will add his forces to the balance bar, which may even things out. You can even see there's 2 Carthaginian stacks nearby, unfortunately neither of them close enough to be involved in the battle. So it's now about half and half. I decided I'd siege them out just to see if they'd try and engage me outside of the town to make things a little bit easier for my pike phalanx. Over with Eusebius, it's now time to push on to attack the Lusitanis' last settlement here in Iberia. You can see the balance bar is quite far in our favour, but it's doing the classic thing where actually it's not in our favour. So the chance for auto-resolve giving a good result is quite poor. So I decided I would just siege this place out. 4 turns isn't too long to wait, and they may even attack us before then and allow us to take it more easily, thus unifying Iberia's Lusitani territory under our rule. We'll see how that goes and the campaign in Mauritania next time. Seeing the level of fame Eusebius had garnered through leading the conquest of Iberia, Cretius was eager to emulate his acts in the relatively untamed lands of Mauritania. Both men were framing themselves to the conquered people as their liberators, while having their agents in the capital portray them as hunters of all those who might harm the city. All the while though, Gelon, perched inside the peak of Olympus, turned and twisted all the news he could catch in a manner that would have made his former oppressor Melanthios proud. As such, Cretius gained only a fraction of the exposure he desired, much to Gelon's gain.